Welcome to the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. My name is Mark Ferguson, and I am your host. I'm a house flipper. I flip 10 to 15 houses a year. I own 13 rental properties with a goal to buy 100 by 2023. I'm also a real estate agent. I've been licensed since '01. I run a team of 9. We sell close to 200 houses a year. So on this show, we like to interview house flippers, landlords, and the best real estate agents in the business. So stay tuned for some great shows. If you want more information on my rentals, on the numbers, how I buy properties, check out InvestFourMore.com. Hey everyone, Mark Ferguson with Invest for More. Welcome to another episode of the Invest for More Real Estate Podcast. Thank you all for listening. As always, I appreciate all the support out there. Today, I'm going to talk about my high-end flip, which was just vacated this week. Super exciting. Been looking forward to this for a long time. There's a lot of things that went on with a tenant in the property, with a long-term 10-year lease, courts involved, lawyers involved, all kinds of stuff going on. So I'm going to talk about all of that, about the property. I bought it for $535. It's probably worth around $850 in that range. So I'm going to give you the lowdown, what happened, how we got the tenant out, how it all went down. And it's a pretty interesting and exciting story. So can't wait to tell you that. Before I get started, just want to remind everybody, I know I push my books and talk about them a lot. And the reason I do that is because it's the easiest way for me to reach the most people. And I spend a lot of time on them. It's really fun for me to write them. And I hope you guys enjoy them who've bought them. And I'm doing a little promotion now where anybody who leaves a new review, I shouldn't say anybody, the first 30 people who leave a new review on one of my paperback books, that's Build a Rental Property Empire, How to Make It Big as a Real Estate Agent, Fix and Flip Your Way to Financial Freedom, or my new one, How to Change Your Mindset to Achieve Huge Success. Leave a review for one of those books. The first 30, I will send you an autographed paperback book of your choice. Just send me an email, show me the review you left, give me an address and your name. I'll personally autograph to you. I'll send it to you for free, no charge to you. So first 30 that end up doing that will get an autographed book. So please keep that in mind and get those in quickly. And we can get started here talking about the property I bought. So I saw this property listed on the MLS on a certain auction site. It had been listed for quite some time. They're asking like $700,000 for it. I didn't even really pay much attention to it because they're asking so much for it. And it was in a town I normally don't buy in, a little far away from me. So I'm like, I don't even want to mess with it. And plus, it was listed as being occupied. So I really didn't want to mess with it because of that as well. So what ended up happening was one day I was browsing the MLS or the auction site, one of the two, I can't quite remember. And I saw they had lowered the price a lot. Instead of asking $700,000 or whatever it was, they're asking like $600,000, a little less. And the starting bid was under $500,000. The starting bid was $4 something. So that got my attention because when I ran the comps and pulled the comps and looked at this house, I thought it was worth over $800,000. And I usually don't mess with high-end flips because of all the costs involved. Financing costs, repair costs, holding costs, because it usually takes longer to sell them, can add up really, really fast. I mean, you can have $100,000, $200,000 of costs into a high-end flip very quickly, and that will eat all of your profit in most cases, because around here at least, owner-occupants are willing to buy those high-end properties that need work on a lot less margin than a flipper will, because the owner-occupant's just looking for a decent deal to live in. They're not looking to make money on it. So I've never really seen that good of a deal on a high-end flip around here. But at those profit margins, I knew there was some room. So what I ended up doing is I made a bid on the property for $400,000, whatever it was, $425,000. I knew the auction company probably would not accept that bid. I knew it was too low, but it at least got a bid into their system, and then I went and looked at the house. So I looked at the house. I could see it was occupied. Didn't talk to anybody there, but definitely saw it was in really good shape from the outside. Now, you never know on the inside. I've seen some really nice houses on the outside that were trashed on the inside, but this one looked really nice. So I went back, waited a few days, and I ended up being the only bidder on the house. I was the only one who bid on it, and that kind of surprised me, but they did not accept my bid. They came back and said, we won't accept your bid at $400,000, but we would accept $500,000. So at $500,000, I knew there was a ton of room in the property. I also knew if I accepted their bid, I still had a few days to back out because I didn't have to send my earnest money in or my deposit until the documents were signed. That gave me a couple days. So I accepted their bid at $500,000, went to the property, checked it out, and I knocked on the door to see who was living there. And when I talked to the person at the door, pleasant lady, she said she was a tenant and she had a lease in place. She said it was a 10-year lease and the courts had challenged it and it held up, but she might be willing to move out because she wanted to move to the East Coast to be with her husband. Very nice lady. She said, I'll send you the lease. I'll send you all the court paperwork. No problem. So I'm like, okay, that threw a little wrench into things. So I did some more research, talked to the title company, tried to find out as much as I could about the property. And I was able to find the lease on the property through a title search. And it was a 10-year lease that started in 2007. So it was actually up January of 2017. However, the occupant had a 3-month right to try and purchase the property after the lease was up. So technically, she had until like May of 2017 to stay in the house. And at the time I was doing this, it was October of 2015. So that was like a year and a half away. So it was a long time to have to wait for someone to vacate a house, especially when you have $500,000 invested into it. So I did as much research as I could, checked into it, tried to find these court cases she was talking about, and I could not find any information on these court cases. And usually the courts will not uphold a 10-year lease. They'll throw it out as invalid. They won't accept them. So I'll give you a little bit of background on how that works. The house had been foreclosed on, so it was bank owned now. This lady was renting the house from the bank, and she was the previous occupant before the bank foreclosed. So the lease was taken out, 2007, actually with her uncle. So it was not an arm's length transaction. Another red flag that makes most leases get thrown out like this. But because of the Tenant Protection Act that was in place a few years ago, if someone has a lease on a house that goes through foreclosure, that lease can stay in effect as long as the tenant keeps paying, she doesn't violate any terms of the lease, and it's considered a valid lease. So when I'm talking about the lease being valid, many times courts have thrown out leases that had really huge long lengths, like a 10-year lease. If any of the parties are related, like the uncle being the owner of the home, leasing it to a relative, or if it's not market rent. And this lease was for $2,200 a month on a house that is, at the time that the lease was taken out, it was probably an $800,000 house at that time as well. The market went down and it's gone back up again since then. So there were 3 huge red flags that said this lease should never be valid. However, the tenant claimed it was valid. But after my first talk with her, she said she sent me the lease, the court cases. She stopped responding to me all. Wouldn't return calls, wouldn't return emails, nothing. So that made me a little concerned as well. Now I was starting to see why other people were not bidding on this house or trying to buy it, because they'd probably talked to her and figured this out. So I talked to a few different people, talked to my father about the deal, talked to my sister, talked to my team. And a lot of the consensus was, you're crazy if you ever try and do this deal. You're going to get in huge trouble. It's going to, you get stuck with this house forever. Another thing popped up along the way that we discovered was someone who had been living in the house before, related to the tenant, was currently in prison for securities fraud. So that was another thing to think about, was who the people I was dealing with. If someone was in prison, maybe that's not exactly the right people to be dealing with in this situation. However, I decided to move forward with it all anyway. So a lot of people thought I was crazy, but I knew there was so much potential in this property. Even if I had to wait it out, it would probably be a good deal. So I ended up going through with it and closing on the deal. Now, how I bought it and paid for it was through private financing. I have an investor who is willing to finance me on many of my deals, who used to be a fix and flipper in town, but it's kind of gone to private money investing since it's tough to find the flips. And he loaned me the money at 10% interest and 2 points, the full amount. I ended up having to pay $535,000 for the property after I paid the buyer's premium and other costs associated with the auction. So I paid all closed on the property, got the financing in place, talked to the tenant. Again, finally, after I bought it, she was sort of nice to me, wanted to know where to pay rent because she wanted to keep paying rent to keep her lease valid. And the numbers worked out. I was paying about $4,500 a month in financing fees, and she is paying me $2,200 a month in rent. So I was definitely losing money every month, but I figured all that into my costs and what I would have to do to buy this property. So while we had the property, talked to a number of different people about it, and finally, after enough searching, we discovered there were some court cases that involved this lease. And the bank, the previous bank who owned the property, had taken this tenant to court to try and force her out of the home, saying the lease wasn't valid, and they lost. The court ruled in favor of the tenant, even though it was a 10-year lease, even though she's related to the owner of the property, and even though it wasn't close to market rent. The bank appealed that ruling, and they lost again. So I've talked to many lawyers, many people about this case, trying to figure out how and why the court would rule that way. And the basic response I got was that judges have a ton of power. They can pretty much decide whatever they want, whether it's close to the law or not. And if they don't like a party, say if they just did not like this bank, they may have ruled in favor of the tenant just to spite the bank because of the way the bank was acting. I think give me a lot of confidence in our justice system, but they said that's how it works sometimes. And since twice the courts had ruled in favor of the tenant, that I basically would have almost no chance of getting it overruled or the lease overthrown if I were to take her to court as well. There's a chance that me being a new owner could bring it to court again, but they said it's really slim that I would be able to force her out. So I began to negotiate with the tenant. We talked back and forth a few times. I went through the house with her because in the lease it did say I had the right to visit the property with proper notice. So I saw the house a couple weeks after I bought it on the inside. And the nice part about that was the house was in fantastic shape. I mean, the carpet needs stretched a little bit. There were a couple of stains in the carpet, maybe a little paint needed. That was it. The rest of the house was in fantastic shape, like 5,200 square feet, all finished, 3-car garage, lots of high-end features, 4 fireplaces, kitchen, really nice kitchen up, another kitchen downstairs. Great house. So that was nice. And the tenant and I talked back and forth a couple times. Basically, she said at first she wanted $100,000 to move out of the house. Then she said she wanted $50,000 to move out of the house. Things did not go well for us. And basically, we stopped talking to each other for a few months. I collected my rent, made my payments to my lender. She didn't respond to me at all. And we just kind of waited each other out to see what would happen. And during this time, I hired one of the best lawyers in the state for foreclosure matters, handle a lot of stuff. And they kind of advised me on how to handle this, what to do. I'm thinking about ways to challenge the lease, ways to figure out how to get her out of there forcibly. And basically they said, that's going to cost me so much money. It's going to be such a hassle. It's not worth it, especially when you don't know if she's actually going to get out. So they advised me, be super nice, let her contact me and see what happens. And she didn't contact me for 2 months. I waited very patiently. And earlier this spring in the summer, I contacted her again and said, hey, getting close to the spring, summer, just seeing if you're still interested in moving out. If you want to talk more about the situation, please let me know. And she responded and said, yes, I would be interested. Please let me know what kind of deal you'd like to work out, and maybe we can get something happening. So what I ended up doing, I offered her $10,000. Well, I offered her $20,000 to move out, basically. Said, I'll give you $20,000 when you're out. If the house is great, in good condition, you get the money. And she agreed in principle to the money, but she wanted it all up front. I said, no, there's no way I can give you the money up front. There's no way that protects me. You could just take the money and stay here. That's not going to work out. So we ended up saying $10,000 when you sign the agreement, and then another $10,000 when you move out. So we basically agreed to what we were going to do, but then she was worried that I wasn't going to pay her. She wanted to be able to place a lien against the house until I paid her. All kinds of weird things were coming up in the deal, and it wasn't working out. And the tricky part was I had lawyers on my side advising me on what to do, and she did not. For a while, she had a lawyer, but she didn't have any counsel representing her, so it was tough with me trying to negotiate with her. And in the end, my lawyer suggested I pay for her to have a lawyer to negotiate. So I actually paid a lawyer $500 to negotiate for her against my lawyers, and we got something worked out. I ended up paying her $10,000 when she signed the agreement. That was the middle of July. And then when she moved out, I'd give her another $10,000 plus her security deposit, which was $2,200. And that happened yesterday, August 1st. So once we got that agreement worked out, everything was civil. We did just fine. The whole situation was great. She moved everything out. She left the kitchen appliances. She left all the light fixtures. Everything looked great. The house looks really good. And I can move on with this deal. So if you guys are interested, there's a video of the home on my YouTube page. I'll put a link in the article notes for this podcast, but you can also just search Mark Ferguson on YouTube and it'll pop up, or InvestFourMore on YouTube and it'll pop up. I went through the house, showed everything. It is a very nice house. And the repairs, I would say it might need $20,000 in repairs. We'll see for sure. That's probably the absolute most. But we have to replace a little bit of carpet upstairs, do a little bit of painting. There might be a window or two that needs replaced. As the seal broke, or maybe we can just replace the glass. And then there's some area where there's a entertainment system in the basement where the speakers are gone. We might replace those speakers, make the house look really nice. Basically, the numbers look like $535 purchase price, $22,200 to pay her. I probably have $5,000 in lawyers' costs, maybe less than that, but I'm assuming it's going to be that much based on how much time I spent with them. About $45,000 in loan costs after getting her rent, paying all the fees. $20,000 repairs, probably $28,000 selling costs, paying an agent, title insurance, and then $10,000 in costs for maintenance, utilities, insurance, and a few other things that might pop up. So I'll basically have about $130,000 of costs into this house. It needs almost no work. But if I sell it for $845,000, which is right where I think it's going to sell for, that would be about $180,000 profit, assuming I get it sold in November, which is probably, I'm hoping I get it sold before that, but that's kind of worst case scenario. So in the end, I mean, it was a risky deal. Obviously, there's a lot going on, but it should be an awesome flip. It should blow, the profit margin on any of my other flips out of the water. I haven't had much of my own money invested in it at all, which is really nice. And it's been a learning experience, an exciting experience, and a lot of fun. And stressful at times, too. So my plans now are to hopefully get it fixed up, repaired in the next 2 weeks, get everything done, get it on the market, get it sold, and take that money, reinvest it into more flips, rental properties, see what we can do with it. I really like doing this high-end flip. It's a lot of fun and exciting, but that does not mean I'm going to keep doing a lot of high-end flips, keep going that route for the reasons I mentioned before. It's very rare to find a really good deal that you can flip in my market. Now, I know I've had a podcast with Will Barnard. When I first did my podcast, he flips $1 million houses in California all the time. There's a lot of people who flip $1 million houses there. That's a completely different market. There's a lot of $1 million houses there. I think like most houses are $1 million there. So it's much different than here. There's a lot more inventory, a lot more of those homes, a lot easier to sell them. Now, this house I have is actually close to Boulder, Colorado, which makes it much easier to sell in that price range than if it were in Greeley. If I were to buy $1 million house, and this isn't quite $1 million house, but it's close to it. If I were to buy $1 million house in Greeley, I would be really scared, really worried about getting it sold because there just aren't that many people looking to buy $1 million houses here. Even if it was a good deal, it might take 6 months to sell. However, for those of you who know Colorado well, the median price in Boulder is close to or over $1 million right now. It's crazy what prices in Boulder are. Now, this house is not in Boulder, but it's very close to it, which gave me more confidence in doing a deal this size. That's one reason why I did this flip. And just the profit margins you have to have on these flips is crazy. So if you read my stuff, listen to my stuff about how I come up with the numbers for flipping a house, my strategy is really close to the 70% rule. The 70% rule states that you should pay 70% of the ARV minus repairs. The ARV is the after repaired value. So you figure out, on this house I bought, on this high-end flip, I bought it for $535. I figured the ARV is $845, the after repaired value. So you take $845,000, you multiply it by 70%, and you get $591,500. So that's what you should pay minus the repairs. So then you have to take the repairs off that. So I'm saying $20,000 in repairs. I should pay $571,500 for that house based on the 70% rule. However, this was a unique situation where I knew I would have a lot of holding costs and cash for keys agreement, eviction costs based on the tenant situation. So I basically had another $20,000 to $40,000 in costs I knew I would have getting her out. So if you subtract that off of it, then you're getting to the $550,000, $540,000 range you should pay for this house. So even though this seems like a completely smoking home run deal, really, it's pretty close to the 70% rule when you look at the numbers. And that's why it's so hard to make a lot of money flipping houses in that high end, because the numbers have to be so good, the discount so high to be safe and make your profit margins. Now, if we were to take the 70% rule and look at one of my typical purchases, I just bought a flip for, let's see which one, $130,000. And I think it's worth about $185,000. So if I take $185,000, multiply it by 70%, I get $129,500. So that says I should buy it for $129,500 if there's no repairs needed. This house is pretty decent shape. It probably only needs 10,000 repairs. So I'll subtract 10,000 from that, and I come up with $120,000 is what I should pay for that flip based on 10,000 repairs needed and $185,000 ARV. So that makes it look like I paid too much for this flip. However, since I'm a real estate agent, I get to save a commission on the purchase price. So I made 3% when I bought it, and I'll also save 3% when I sell it because I don't have to pay a listing agent. So that kind of makes up for that difference in the profit margin. And that's one other thing I forgot to mention about that flip I bought. The high-end flip, when I bought it for $535,000, I was paid a 3% commission on that when I bought it. So that was another $535,000 times 3% is $16,000. I was paid $16,000 at closing for buying that house. I didn't really have any money invested into it at all because of the private financing. So my actual profit margin when I get this sold is going to be close to $200,000 once I add in that commission I made when I bought the property. So that's my story on the high-end flip. We will see how everything goes. Hopefully, we get it repaired quickly. It sells for as much as I think it will sell for. Even if it sells for less than that, I'm still going to make money. I had very little of my own money invested into it. Obviously, there's some stress, but it was exciting. It was really fun to go through this process. I had a really good time doing it, and I would not be scared to do it again if a similar situation arose. I wouldn't be afraid to do a high-end flip again, but they're just so hard to find with the right numbers. And again, it seems like a crazy situation, having to deal with a tenant, having to go through this whole mess. But at the same time, there's no way I would have ever gotten this deal if it was vacant and easy to buy. It would have sold for, $700,000 to an owner occupant or more, $750,000. So really having this crazy situation with a tenant is what allowed me to get this deal, to have a really good high profit margin and a lot of potential. All right, that's all I've got for this week's episode. Like I said, be sure to leave a review on my paperback books. The first 30 people who do that will be getting an autographed copy of one of my books for free. I pay for shipping, everything. I'll send it to you, so be sure to hop on that. And, as always, check out the blog, and I'll talk to you guys later.